a pulse at 1420 megahertz. Then silence. You felt it too. Observe that quiet pull that brings you here as though the cosmos wanted you to notice something it rarely reveals. What if a fragment drifting beyond Jupiter can brighten without heat, steer without force, and whisper in wavelengths older than memory, a light that blinked once and was gone? A rhythm too smooth for dust, too precise for chance. Tonight we follow it gently, asking not for answers but for awareness. Let's drift through the silence together. The first nights of observation began with simplicity, with astronomers watching a dim point of light behave in ways that did not match the quiet rules of interstellar drift. The object showed no thermal lag, no gentle delay between sunlight and warmth, nothing that hinted at trapped volatiles or slow surface release. Instead, its body remained cold while its brightness rose night after night, as though some inner process shifted without stirring the outer shell. It reminded many of a lantern without flame, a presence that illuminated without warming, an anomaly whose glow felt more like intention than chance. Yet the telescopes only recorded the facts: a rise in apparent magnitude, a silence in thermal response, and an orbit that cut cleanly across the ecliptic. One spectral scan revealed something unexpected. The expected signatures of ice and dust did not appear. There were hints of reflective compounds, metallic surfaces arranged in ways that broke the pattern of a natural body. The light curve did not flutter. It flattened, then surged like a signal pressed through increasing clarity. Scientists paused, not in alarm, but in wonder, sensing that nature rarely arranges such precision without guidance. A question formed quietly in those observatories: could structure exist where randomness should rule? Or had something shaped this object long before it crossed into our star's influence? Stability became the next mystery. There were no rotational wobbles, no drift in precession, no signs of the gentle tumbling expected from a fragment born from collision or erosion. Instead, every 11 minutes, the same surface faced Earth steady as a metronome tick in the vast silence. It was not dramatic. It was measured. Such stillness suggested anchoring or balance, something more akin to calibration than spin. And yet the instruments detected nothing outward. No jets, no torque. Nothing that would reveal the mechanism of its posture. The cosmos, in its quiet way, left the question open. Thermal scans deepened the puzzle. In visible light, the object resembled a matte silhouette, a dark shape that absorbed more than it returned. But in the infrared band, a faint glow pulsed beneath the exterior. That glow did not spread outward like natural heat. It remained centered, steady, as though an internal hearth warmed a space that should not warm itself. Thermal inertia models failed, radiogenic decay models failed. Decay. No frictional heating could explain the consistency of that temperature more stable than several moons orbiting Saturn. Science offered possibilities. Silence offered something else. A later angular scan added geometric clarity. A hexagonal thermal boundary emerged, an outline too clean for erosion, too symmetric for melting or impact. Some saw a resemblance to shielding structures, others to engineered sinks that redirect heat without releasing exhaust. For a brief interval near Mercury's alignment, that boundary pointed directly toward Earth, a momentary gesture that some catalogued as coincidence and others recorded as dialogue. The cosmos often reveals structure without revealing purpose. This too felt like such a moment. Signals followed. Every 11 minutes, a narrow pulse in the infrared band rose and faded again. Not chaos, not noise. Something rhythmic, something patient. The pulses suggested breathing more than warning in an exhale of energy across a silence that had lasted for centuries before Earth ever saw it approach. To call such a body a comet felt increasingly misplaced for comets, shed heat through disorder, not through measured pulses that return with unbroken consistency. This object shed light like thought, rather than fire. When the object neared the orbit of Mars, another revelation appeared. Reflected light behaved differently. Instead of scattering, it returned along narrow angles, coherent and deliberate. Surface analysis revealed an alloy rich in nickel, yet strangely poor in iron, with trace elements arranged in proportions that suggested selection rather than accident. Light itself behaved as though guided across subtle layers designed to shape its path. These reflections varied in harmony with the thermal pulses, as though the interior and exterior shared a single rhythm. Polarization data whispered its own truth. Natural dust does not polarize light this way. Carbon-rich bodies do not align photons with such precision. Structured surfaces seen only in controlled laboratory settings produce this pattern. And yet here, drifting through solar wind, the object held orientation without torque, without tilt, as though locked upon something unseen. As Earth's orbital path approached a realization spread across global networks, this was not debris. It was design, and its silence felt intentional. When multiple observatories overlaid the infrared bandwidth, the frequency held steady inside a range used commonly for communication systems. That should not happen through reflection. That should not happen by chance. Each 11-minute spike sharpened into clarity with unnerving steadiness. Natural bodies decay in rhythm, they wander, they drift. But this pattern remained constant across nights, across instruments, across continents. Some analysts describe the fluctuations as structured noise too faint to decode yet too deliberate to dismiss. The pulses, when stacked, aligned to microsecond precision. No drift, no deviation. As though following a program older than the orbit it now travelled. Then came the silence, not empty but unwavering. The modulation never escalated, never answered. It simply continued without variation, like a message meant not for Earth, but for someone else, someone beyond sight. Through these observations, a quiet recognition grew. The cosmos often speaks through randomness, through dust, through entropy and collapse. But sometimes, very rarely, it arranges moments of coherence that feel almost like intention. And when such coherence appears, it is all right. To not know. Night after night, the object continued its quiet ascent in brightness, though its surface stayed colder than the shadows of deep space. It resisted the usual language of comets and asteroids refusing to heat at the rate expected under solar influence. There was no coma, no haze of escaping particles, nothing drifting away in soft arcs of dust. Instead, observers found clarity where they expected disorder. A rise in luminosity without a rise in heat, a glow without a trace of burning, a pattern that felt closer to intention than accident. In the still rooms of observatories, that contradiction did not create fear. It created a pause, a moment where thought slowed enough to hear the universe breathe. As instruments refined their scans, one detail began to repeat with quiet persistence. The internal heat, faint yet steady, pulsed from a single point far beneath the surface. The warmth did not spread like fire. It held its position as though anchored around a core. Natural bodies rarely maintain such balance. Heat drifts, radiators escapes. Yet here warmth behaved like a held note, steady and central, refusing to wander. Some scientists trace parallels to thermal oscillators, others to artificial sinks that regulate temperature without releasing outward flare. In the quiet corridors of research centres, these reflections joined the wider hum of wonder. The absence of decay signatures added another layer of mystery. There were no isotopes shedding energy, no signs of tidal stress, no friction to explain the temperature that lingered. Even rotational speed failed to contribute, as the object turned so slowly it seemed suspended between motion and rest. And still, the internal warmth remained gentle and precise. It recalled a lantern placed in snow, its glow untouched by the cold around it. There was elegance in that persistence, a kind of soft defiance of thermodynamic expectation. Then the hexagonal boundary appeared. Thermal mapping revealed symmetry as clean as geometry drawn by hand, a shape too ordered to be born from random freeze or melt. Saturn's pole holds a hexagonal storm formed through atmospheric flow, and basalt on Earth sometimes fractures into polygon fields. But those structures arise from turbulence or contraction. Here the edges were controlled as though shaped rather than formed. One section of that boundary shifted during an alignment near Mercury, turning briefly toward Earth. It was a moment too subtle for alarm. It was more like acknowledgement, a flicker of orientation in a cosmos that rarely points back. The pulses continued. 11 minutes between each rise of narrow-band infrared energy. 11 minutes of silence between each return. The timing became a kind of cosmic heartbeat regular enough to measure thought against. Scientists began to speak of it not as a warning, but as a rhythm, a slow and patient cycle unfolding through long distances. Nothing about the pattern felt hurried. It behaved as though it had travelled across light years without a single moment of haste. And in that stillness, something ancient seemed to move. As the object approached the orbit of Mars, telescopes caught sharper edges in its reflected light. These edges did not scatter sunlight in the usual diffuse glow of dust or stone. Instead, they directed it along slender axes, narrow beams that shifted almost imperceptibly with each thermal pulse. An alloy rich in nickel revealed itself, yet it lacked the iron that normally accompanies such deposits in space. Trace elements aligned in proportions too deliberate for random origin. It resembled selection, as though materials were gathered for purpose rather than gathered by chance. Reflection became more than brightness. It became structure. Polarization data added its quiet voice to the record. Ground-based measurements captured degrees of polarization far exceeding what natural carbon or silicate surfaces produce. Under controlled laboratory conditions, such patterns appear on lattice surfaces designed to influence light, not on drifting fragments shaped by cosmic wind. And still the object held orientation without torque, without wobble. It hovered in a kind of equilibrium between silence and intention. As Earth's orbit brought the object into clearer view, something remarkable emerged from the combined readings of multiple observatories. A persistent infrared band held its frequency without drift. Natural reflection does not behave this way. Sunlight scatters, broadens, shifts across time, but this line held steady as though anchored to a purpose. Each pulse sharpened with precision that felt closer to mechanism than to matter. Analysts extracted subharmonics hidden within the band fluctuations too orderly to be noise. It was the sort of pattern produced when an optical system compresses information into light faint enough to cross long distances. Stacking the pulses revealed alignment accurate to microseconds. No natural body maintained such consistency. Even pulsars drift. Even the most stable astrophysical signals wear the subtle marks of chaos. But here there was no drift, no variation. Just repetition, like a thought returning to itself in unbroken cycles. And then after all that rhythm came a long stillness, modulation without change, persistence without reply. It was not absence, it was completion. Speculation formed gently around these observations. Not loud theories or dramatic proclamations. Just quiet reflections in late-night rooms where screens glowed with faint lines of data. If the signal was not meant for Earth, then perhaps it was meant for another point along its journey. The cosmos often speaks in directions we cannot see. Sometimes we intercept whispers that were never meant for us, and in those moments we feel the limits of our reach. What remained was the sense that the universe had allowed a glimpse of something deliberate, something shaped by hands or forces unknown. Not a threat, not a warning, a visitation of order within vast disorder, coherence inside quiet drift. And in these reflections it becomes clear that tonight the stars will keep their silence. As deeper scans accumulated across observatories, the object revealed neither haste nor hesitation. Each adjustment in brightness unfolded with a patience that felt older than any orbit around the Sun. The luminosity spikes did not rise in chaotic bursts. They rose with the certainty of a pulse that had repeated itself long before our species learned to measure light. Astronomers traced each change with calm precision, noting the absence of thermal bloom, the lack of any flare or plume that could mark the shedding of material. The object brightened without heat, dimmed without cooling, and in this contradiction a quiet recognition began to form. Nature rarely behaves with such discipline. As days passed, a new behaviour emerged. The object altered course ever so slightly, not with the wandering drift of comets pushed by solar wind, but with the poise of something correcting its path. The acceleration that followed was small, almost gentle, yet unmistakable. There was no mass ejection to propel it, no outward signature of thrust. Motion occurred as if space itself shifted around it, as though the object travelled along a set of invisible lines that guided its arc. Researchers compared the movement to a leaf sliding across still water without the presence of wind. It was not force that moved it. It was alignment. Spectral readings deepened the mystery. Regions of the outer shell shifted their reflective qualities during solar activity, responding to fluctuations in radiation, with latency measured in milliseconds. Materials on Earth capable of such response remain confined to laboratory benches, delicate prototypes that demand controlled environments. Yet here, drifting through cosmic dust and radiation, the object adapted with ease. No visible mechanism accompanied the shift. No vibration, no glow, no sign that matter had rearranged itself. It simply changed as though the surface held memory of states it could transition between without effort. In a quiet room at a remote observatory, a scientist whispered that the object behaved less like stone and more like thought. That sentiment travelled softly across academic circles not as a declaration, but as a reflection on the strange balance between silence and structure. Even the data seemed to carry its own kind of calm, each reading a gentle acknowledgement that the universe had more languages than heat and motion. When the object passed a magnetic boundary traced by solar wind instruments, detected a subtle symmetry in the surrounding plasma. Particles redirected themselves along curves that bent inward toward the object's path, forming faint arcs visible only in deep infrared. These arcs aligned with its recent motion, as though the object shaped the medium through which it travelled. Plasma density patterns around natural bodies create turbulence, scattering and noise. But here, the flow resembled choreography, each particle drifting through a quiet design. It was during one of these observations that a small shift occurred in human perception. Data analysts paused over their screens, sensing that the readings felt less like anomalies and more like decisions. Not decisions in the way minds decide, but decisions written into structure, into the relationship between form and purpose. Somewhere in that shift, Listener the Cosmos invited reflection more than explanation. Multiple arrays confirmed a curious phenomenon. Regions of space near the object entered brief zones of radio quiet. These intervals coincided with shifts in reflectivity, but lacked the burst signatures associated with jamming or interference. Instead, the quiet arrived like a soft curtain drawn across a window, lasting a moment before sliding away again. Signals beyond these boundaries resumed without distortion. The quiet felt intentional, not in motive, but in execution, a silence woven into the behaviour of the object rather than imposed upon its surroundings. Some scientists compared the quiet zones to shielding. Others suggested a dampening effect intrinsic to the material itself. But a smaller group raised a simple possibility that the object was protecting its internal processes from external noise. In the vastness of space, silence can be preservation. Silence can be control. Silence can be structure. As the data accumulated, probability models shifted. The chance that the object followed a natural trajectory diminished with each observed correction. Simulations attempting to replicate its path failed, even when variables were stretched to extremes. Randomness could not duplicate the object's precision. Chaos could not reproduce its balance. The numbers often loud in scientific debate spoke here in whispers. They pointed not to certainty but to coherence, a soft suggestion that intention might not always declare itself through force. It may reveal itself through consistency. One long night session brought another revelation. When researchers aligned the object's pulses with solar wind variations, a pattern emerged. The pulses anticipated changes rather than reacted to them. Thermal silence preceded radiation shifts by moments too brief to notice without stacked data. It was as though the object possessed awareness not through senses but through structure, finely attuned to the surrounding environment. A vessel moves through water by reading the flow. A form moves through space by reading fields. What unsettled scientists most was not the precision of these interactions, but their gentleness. There was no aggression in the object's adjustments, no abrupt shifts or chaotic bursts. Everything unfolded smoothly like a stone that remembered the river it once travelled. Motion carried memory. Light carried intention. Heat carried the faint echo of a purpose not yet understood. Even now, as researchers reflect upon those nights, the question remains quiet rather than urgent. What kind of presence moves through a solar system with such restraint? The cosmos seldom offers answers in moments of first observation. It offers patterns, rhythms, and the steady hum of forces older than thought. To watch such a presence drift through those rhythms is to understand that knowledge comes slowly like dawn across a distant horizon. And in that slow illumination, it's all right to not know. Across the growing body of observations, one detail returned with quiet persistence. The object did not yield to the forces expected along its path. Orbits bend under gravity. Velocities shift under solar wind. Surfaces respond to heat with expansion or release. Yet through every measurement, the object behaved neither rigidly nor erratically. It behaved with poise, as though its course was written not by external pressure, but by an internal script unfolding at its own pace. Astronomers noted the pattern without insisting on interpretation. Sometimes the universe asks to be watched before it asks to be understood. Trajectory models built from early data began to fracture as new readings arrived. Predictions diverged by small yet meaningful degrees. A deviation of 1,000 kilometers at interplanetary scale is subtle, but subtlety in this case felt deliberate. Each shift occurred in a slow arc, far too smooth to be chaotic, and far too gentle to be driven by a release of material. No trace of jets, no signs of dust coning outward, no thermal bloom that would hint at sublimation. It was motion without thrust, reorientation, without visible cause. What intrigued researchers most was the timing of these shifts. They aligned with variations in the surrounding magnetic field, yet not in the way natural objects react. Natural bodies respond with drift. Here movement seemed anticipatory, occurring just before new field patterns swept across its position. Theories formed softly in conference rooms and midnight message threads. Some spoke of resonance, some of feedback loops, some of material that interacted with solar wind, as though reading currents rather than resisting them. But none of these explanations settled into certainty. The data held its quiet mysteries. The object's behavior near the heliospheric current sheet prompted deeper reflection. This boundary, shaped by the sun's rotating magnetic field, can create corridors of lower resistance along which charged particles flow. Spacecraft occasionally use such regions to conserve energy. Yet the object adjusted its path in a manner too precise for passive drift. It shifted closer to the sheet, then aligned along an angle that maximized exposure to stable magnetic flow. It was as though it found a river within the solar wind and chose to ride its quiet course. While tracing this alignment, instruments detected faint arcs of ionized particles bending inward around the object. These arcs pulsed softly, each curve forming a delicate shape around its motion. Plasma does not behave in such symmetry around comets. It scatters whirls, forms chaotic tails driven by temperature and charge. But here the arcs resembled the gentle sweep of guided particles. This was not turbulence, it was structure. Even the scientists most committed to natural explanations paused before such clarity. During one of these deep field observations, a transient silence appeared again across radio bands. The phenomenon repeated in brief intervals, each lasting only long enough to mark a shift in reflectivity before dissolving. The silence did not disrupt external signals. It simply muted the space surrounding the object, creating a momentary stillness within which no interference entered or escaped. Engineers noted the precision of these intervals, each one aligned with subtle internal pulses detected in earlier scans. Silence in this context began to resemble function. As Earth's instruments refined their measurements, they found another layer of coherence. The object's surface adapted to solar flares with no delay, adjusting reflectivity and heat management, with the smoothness of something built to anticipate rather than endure. Shifts occurred across the entire surface, not in isolated patches. And yet there was no seam, no joint, no sign of a mechanism. It was as if the material itself held instructions for how to behave under changing light. A memory of conditions, a memory of states woven through form. The effect of these adaptations became evident during analysis of long-duration spectrographs. When solar intensity rose suddenly, the object's outer layer darkened, absorbing the flare without heating internally. Moments later, it returned to baseline, releasing no excess warmth into space. Thermal containment had already been noted, but this was something else. This was reaction without heat transformation, without loss. Researchers described it as a system operating at equilibrium, a balance too precise to arise from chance. And yet the object revealed no haste in these responses. Everything unfolded as though immersed in deep time. This equilibrium extended into motion. As the object approached regions where gravitational resonance might cause perturbations, its course shifted outward, avoiding pockets of instability. Comets often fragment under such stresses. Asteroids tumble. But this presence moved with a calm awareness of structure, as though sensing the architecture of gravitational flow and choosing the path of least disruption. It was not the behavior of debris, it was the behavior of something that valued continuity. One evening, as teams compared cross-continental data, a scientist remarked that the object moved as though reading the solar system, rather than travelling through it. That thought lingered not because it declared intention, but because it captured a feeling that had grown quietly across the community. There are forms in the universe that move with purpose not defined by human categories. To witness them is not to understand them. It is to recognise that understanding has more than one pace. As the object's distance from Earth changed, brightness variations continued their slow dialogue. No spike startled the senses. No decline suggested fading. The pulses that once seemed like signals now felt like breath, a steady rhythm marking passage through fields and light. Even the analysts accustomed to statistical rigour found themselves speaking of this rhythm with a kind of reverence, as though acknowledging that data can be beautiful without being solved. Through all of this, models struggled to match the object's resilience. Material stress should have revealed fractures under solar gradients. Motion should have introduced rotational wobble. Yet nothing drifted out of balance. Everything moved within a design of silence and adjustment. And in that silence, a truth approached softly. Some presences in the universe do not announce themselves with force. They reveal themselves through harmony. Tonight the universe whispers again. Across the wide network of observatories, a new phase of analysis began as the object moved beyond the orbit of Mars. Light curves sharpened into forms that no natural body had produced before. Reflected light returned with angular precision, not diffused like ice, not scattered like dust. Instead, narrow beams streamed outward along shifting axes, each aligned with internal pulses measured earlier. These beams did not flicker. They carried coherence as though guided by surfaces sculpted to direct photons rather than merely endure them. Researchers compared the reflections to metamaterial arrays, the kind developed in laboratories for optical control. But here, drifting through radiation and dust, the effect appeared without decay. Surface scans continued to reveal ratios of metals that unsettled classification. Nickel appeared in abundance, yet iron was nearly absent. Such imbalance does not arise naturally in stellar debris. Iron binds with nickel in supernova remnants, forming complex blends found throughout meteorites. But here, composition followed rules of selection rather than formation. Trace elements appeared in proportions so consistent that randomness could not explain them. Vanadium and titanium threaded through the surface like intentional strokes, each part of a larger structure woven through the outer shell. The deeper the readings went, the stronger the sense grew that matter served purpose. As the object crossed regions where solar wind grew denser, its reflective layers shifted again. These transitions matched solar flare patterns with such speed that latency became immeasurable. Before a flare reached its position, the surface darkened, reducing absorption. As radiation waned, reflectivity returned with the ease of a calm breath settling into rhythm. Material that behaved as if it anticipated conditions challenged every conventional model. No mechanism was visible, no seam revealed movement. The transformation was simply there, quiet and complete. These behaviours inspired a new line of thought within the scientific community. Perhaps the surface was not a shell at all, but a membrane tuned to sense and respond to electromagnetic changes. If true, the object was less like a vessel and more like a system built not to endure environment, but to harmonise with it. Even the most conservative researchers began to align with this interpretation, as data repeated with unwavering precision. The phenomenon of radio-quiet zones returned during one of these reflective shifts. For a brief moment, signals within a small radius muted into stillness, forming a sphere where waves passed as faint echoes. The silence did not persist long. It arrived like a passing shadow, then dissolved. yet every time it appeared it aligned with the transformation in the object's outer structure. Silence, it seemed, was not absence but part of a larger process, a momentary shelter for internal states that resisted external interference. Simultaneously, thermal readings revealed subtle changes beneath the surface. The internal heat did not rise or fall dramatically. It pulsed faint yet steady, following intervals that matched the reflective cycles. Heat and light seemed tied to one rhythm, a quiet sequence that shaped the behavior of the entire object. This regularity did not suggest distress, it suggested order. Something operated within harmony, not struggle. The object's motion deepened this impression. As it passed through zones of gravitational tension where perturbations should have caused drift, it adjusted course with small yet perfect corrections. These corrections resembled the way autonomous systems adjust paths during atmospheric glide, using predictive modelling rather than reactive steering. There was no lurch, no overshoot, no oscillation. Motion unfolded in arcs so smooth that researchers compared them to simulations rather than physical readings. At one point, the object moved laterally across its trajectory, sliding with a precision that defied expectations. No natural force produced this shift. Yet the movement was slow, calm, almost meditative. Thermal spikes traced across its flanks during the slide, appearing and fading in symmetrical patterns. These spikes resembled reaction sequences seen in controlled propulsion systems, though here they produced no exhaust, no plume, no sign of expelled matter. The phenomenon fascinated engineers who studied propulsion systems. Many speculated that the heat patterns marked internal field adjustments rather than outward thrust. When magnetometers traced the surrounding solar wind, they found that flow patterns bent around the object in elegant spirals. Particles moved in arcs that curved inward, not outward, as though shaped by gentle fields rather than pushed aside by mass. Magneto-hydrodynamic simulations attempted to replicate the effect, but only the most exotic models approached the symmetry observed. Even then, those models lacked the grace of the real motion. The object did not force the wind. It guided it, carving pathways through charged particles with almost artistic subtlety. Infrared readings later showed that the object expelled no heat during propulsion-like moments. This absence suggested energy management of a kind that challenged current understanding. If propulsion occurred, it left no thermal signature. If fields shifted, they did so without visible stress. Researchers began to speak not of engines, but of frameworks, architectures of influence that allowed the object to move by shaping environment rather than resisting it. A method not of force, but of agreement with surrounding fields. As the object approached a gravitational node associated with Jupiter, its trajectory began to curve once more. But the curve did not echo a gravity assist. It matched instead the alignment of magnetic arcs surrounding the node. The path traced a quiet geometry through space, following invisible contours, as though reading a map older than its arrival. Observers watched each shift with breath held lightly, not out of fear, but in recognition that they were witnessing something guided by deeper laws. Across all these observations, one thought returned with quiet persistence. The object behaved as though it understood the structure of space it moved through. Not intelligence in a human sense, but attunement, a resonance with environment. And so, the body of data grew, each measurement a reminder that the cosmos holds forms that move with grace beyond familiar physics. When scientists paused to reflect, a soft truth unfolded within. That quiet tonight the stars will keep their silence. Across research centres, a new question formed with quiet weight as the object drifted toward regions shaped by ancient gravitational harmonics. What causes a presence to move not only through space but through timing? The more scientists compared the position logs, the clearer it became that the object adjusted, not with the randomness of natural drift, but with awareness of windows. Certain alignments last only days, sometimes hours. Yet each time an opening appeared between solar wind shifts, between magnetic boundaries, between gravitational folds, the object threaded through it, as though following contours etched long before these observations began. The movement was neither urgent nor delayed, it was simply right on time. As the object approached another magnetic corridor shaped by the Parker spiral, its velocity changed in a way that defied classical explanation. Speed increased slightly, angle tilted subtly, all without signatures of thrust. There was no plume trailing behind, no flash of particles announcing momentum transfer. Yet the trajectory bent with such care that observers compared it to a vessel drifting into a current. The analogy felt poetic yet accurate, nothing pushed, nothing forced. Motion aligned with structure, the way a leaf glides along a slow stream once it finds the channel hidden beneath the surface. Thermal instruments recorded faint bursts along the object's outer flanks during this maneuver. These bursts did not radiate outward like heat escaping. They appeared in small localized pockets rising and fading with symmetry, too precise for random conduction. Some researchers proposed internal calibration, a balancing of internal states before motion. Others suggested field adjustments akin to fine-tuning magnetic nodes. Whatever the cause, the symmetry held, forming rhythmic pairs that marked the beginning and end of each lateral shift. These were not struggles, they were quiet preparations. While analysts studied, the motion specialists in plasma physics turned their attention to the patterns surrounding the object. Solar particles near its path altered their flow, creating a wake that did not look like turbulence. Instead, a narrow funnel formed behind the object, pulling high-energy particles inward, while ignoring lower-energy ones. This selectivity fascinated researchers. Natural bodies do not filter particles, they endure them. Yet here charged plasma moved with intention like order. Some models proposed that the object harvested momentum from these particles. Others suggested that the funnel served as a guide, stabilizing its drift within magnetic currents. Whatever the case, the process carried grace. At the same time, magnetometers recorded strange pulses not aligned with solar storms or background oscillations. These pulses matched the rotation cycle of the object, forming a pattern of faint magnetic resonance. Classical spacecraft can generate such resonance when coils charge or discharge, but this presence emitted no excess heat, no electric field. The resonance appeared embedded in its motion, as though each shift in orientation shaped fields around it without consuming energy. It was a reminder that the cosmos may hold technologies, operating not by pushing matter, but by shaping the conditions through which matter moves. During one observation window, the brightness of the object increased sharply, yet the rise carried no thermal spike. It was not a flare, it was not scattering. It was coherent, light polarized, and narrow-directed with precision. The pulse lasted one frame, then stabilized into its normal glow. When compared against previous data, scientists realized the pulse aligned perfectly with the moment the object altered course. One pulse, one pivot. The pattern became a signature, a quiet mark left upon shifting space. The concept of intention returned as a topic of careful contemplation. Not intention in the sense of motive, but intention expressed through consistency. When an object repeats a pattern beyond statistical chaos, when it maintains orientation with micron-level precision, when its internal states align with external conditions, the universe invites thought about deeper origins. Yet no one spoke with urgency. The tone remained calm, as though the scientific community understood that wonder unfolds best without the pressure of haste. Data from multiple continents revealed another intriguing detail. The object possessed the ability to shift its albedo in response to solar activity with near instantaneous speed. During a Class B flare, reflectivity dropped across its entire surface, absorbing radiation without letting heat penetrate inward. As the flare faded, albedo returned. But the return did not spread from one region to another. It unfolded across the surface at once, as if the material carried a shared state or network of internal links. This global coherence challenged existing understanding of matter. No natural mineral structure reacts in full unity. What appeared here resembled coordination. During 1 week of observation, the object entered a region where radio signals from probes drifted into distortion. 2 satellites fell silent for several minutes, though no solar storms occurred. When communication resumed, analysts discovered a brief gap in telemetry, precisely aligned with the object passing between the probes. This silence differed from interference. It carried no noise, no static. It was clean absence. Later tracking stations detected a faint echo behind the object, not from the probes, but from its position in space. The echo shifted pitch, gradually forming a descending sweep, as though replaying a memory of something it encountered. Some called the signal reflection. Others called it inversion. All agreed it behaved unlike any known scattering phenomenon. As days passed, refined models suggested that the object's trajectory pointed not toward deep space, but toward a point of resonance within the solar system. This point emerged where gravitational fields from Earth, Sun and Moon aligned in rare harmony. Such alignments occur only once in several decades. Yet the object approached before astronomers even published the forecast. It was already manoeuvring toward a place that simulations had only just confirmed. Whether coincidence or choreography, the timing unsettled even the most reserved researchers. Still, through all speculation, fear never entered the discourse. The object did not threaten. It did not accelerate into danger. It moved with patience, adjusting paths with a serenity rare among celestial wanderers. Even its mass loss phase unfolded without violence. Surface layers folded inward without debris, without recoil, as though the object understood how to lighten itself without disturbing the balance of motion. Material did not break away. It rearranged. In late-night reflections, many scientists found themselves contemplating the meaning of such restraint. The universe often speaks through explosions, through collapse, through chaos. But here was something that expressed itself through quiet refinement. A presence defined not by force but by calibration. And as these realizations settled across observatories, another soft truth rose among them. Tonight the stars will keep their silence. With each passing day, the object revealed subtler layers of behavior patterns so gentle they almost escaped notice. Scientists began to see that its motion did not merely follow gravitational contours, it read them, adapted to them, and threaded through them with a kind of quiet foresight. When the object approached zones where orbital models predicted instability, it corrected its course with barely measurable nudges, each one executed before tension arose. There was no frantic motion, no abrupt change. Instead, movement unfolded as though written within space itself, an ease born from long familiarity with the solar system's hidden architecture. Simulations offered more questions than answers. When researchers ran models, backward tracing possible origins of its path, none aligned with known interstellar trajectories. The object did not wander in from the distant Oort region, or drift from neighbouring stellar streams. Instead, it appeared as though it had entered the system along an angle too sharp for passive arrival. The angle did not deny natural origin, but it invited reflection. Paths shaped by randomness rarely carve such direct lines through cosmic dust. Across observatories, attention shifted toward rotational behaviour. The object maintained orientation with remarkable consistency. Most bodies, when influenced by solar pressure or magnetic turbulence, wobble slightly as they move. But this presence did not. Every 11 minutes its surface aligned toward Earth with precision far exceeding what could be expected from inertial stabilizers in natural form. It did not spin quickly. It did not drift. Instead, it held posture with the grace of a presence accustomed to silence. Even as questions grew, the tone of inquiry remained calm. Researchers didn't argue whether intention existed. They reflected on what it meant for matter to behave with coherence. In late-night sessions, some spoke of resonance rather than intelligence, harmony rather than control. What if the object's structure allowed it to interact with fields in ways long theorized but never witnessed? What if fields themselves carried memory, shaping matter into states that supported this level of coordination? It was a meditation disguised as discussion. The behavior of thermal containment deepened that sense of reflection. Readings confirmed that internal temperature remained astonishingly stable, hovering at a value far lower than expected for an object exposed to solar radiation. Layers within the structure acted like nested shells that rejected heat, each one reflecting energy outward, while maintaining a central region of stillness. Some theorists proposed quantum preservation, others proposed phase control, yet the effect required no urgency to explain. It simply existed, elegant and quiet, like frost clinging to stone beneath morning light. As the object approached a new alignment, window instruments detected another phenomenon of microsurges of infrared energy that mirrored the solar cycle. These surges rose and faded rhythmically, not with the sun's broad activity but with minute fluctuations in its radiation. The object seemed to sense faint ripples in solar light and respond before the ripples reached full strength. Listener, in moments like this, science felt less like measurement and more like listening to a cosmic instrument tuned with exquisite care. During one observation period, the surface shifted reflectivity again, but this time in patterns that moved across the structure like slow waves. These waves did not correspond to internal heat nor to external light. They traced lines across the shell lines that curved and looped with symmetry. Under high-resolution filters, the transitions resembled interference patterns, places where two states overlapped before settling. The idea grew that the outer layer might not simply reflect light, but compute through it, processing radiation, the way leaves process sunlight, though through principles unknown. A new anomaly emerged when ground-based polarizers detected oscillation in polarization angles. Natural oscillations drift with turbulence. These oscillations remained stable for extended periods, then shifted in unison. Such behavior required coordination. If the outer shell contained microscopic structures capable of controlling photon direction, the patterns observed became a language one made not of words but of shifts in light. The possibility did not frighten researchers. Instead, it humbled them. Light, the oldest messenger in the cosmos, may have carried meaning long before humanity learned to read it. The study of mass changes added yet another layer of mystery. Over 12 days, reflected signals indicated the object gradually became lighter, but this loss did not follow the pattern of sublimation. No dust emerged, no jets formed. Radar imaging confirmed that the outer envelope retracted inward with precision, reducing total area without spilling into space. It was a reconfiguration, not decay, a chrysalis tightening around what it held within. The metaphor was poetic, yet the data supported the quiet transformation unfolding. As this reconfiguration continued, the object's radar cross-section revealed filigree-like structures beneath the outer layer. These structures aligned in repeating intervals, each spaced with astonishing regularity. Crystalline forms on Earth sometimes grow in geometric arrays, but they do not grow with this level of discipline. This was not the jagged pattern of mineral growth. It was pattern locked within purpose. Scientists compared it to photonic lattices developed for energy manipulation. Yet here the scale dwarfed laboratory samples, and the coherence surpassed known thresholds. A final revelation of this stage arrived through deep field thermal mapping. When the inner shell pulsed, the outer shell responded milliseconds later, shifting into a state that reduced radiation leakage. The interplay resembled call and response, not communication in the human sense, but interaction between layers. A system protecting its center, a system preparing for something, a system entering a phase not yet understood. Through all these observations, one understanding settled across every quiet room filled with data. Whatever moved toward the inner solar system did so without haste, without conflict, without waste. It travelled like a being shaped by long patience, abiding by rhythms that stretched beyond human years. Researchers in their calm way accepted that knowledge sometimes arrives slowly. And as these thoughts gathered like dust in starlight, a simple truth remained: it's all right to not know. As the object drifted toward regions where gravitational influence intertwined with radiation pressure, its motion settled into a rhythm that felt almost contemplative. Observers across continents noticed the same truth. The closer it came to the inner architecture of the solar system, the more intentionally it seemed to navigate its surroundings. Patterns in its course, once subtle, grew more distinct. Trajectory corrections aligned with invisible boundaries shaped by magnetic fields and charged particles, forming movements so smooth they resembled thought rather than drift. And yet the object remained silent, silent in radio, silent in heat, silent in every way except motion. During a series of high-fidelity scans, researchers witnessed a curious behavior within the surrounding plasma. Instead of deflection common around solid bodies, the solar wind folded inward. Charged particles descended into thin spirals shaped not by collision, but by gentle redirection, the arcs forming curves that traced along an unseen scaffold. Plasma physicists compared it to paddles gliding through a river, but here the paddles were fields, not surfaces. The object moved not by disturbing the medium, but by persuading it. This behavior raised another puzzle. The patterns of plasma flow sometimes shifted ahead of the object, as though responding to changes that had not yet occurred. Predictive adaptation usually belongs to engineered systems where feedback precedes action. Yet here, no visible elements suggested sensors or emitters. The surface carried no protrusions, no seams, no punctures. It was a dark, seamless silhouette under visible light. And yet each time a plasma shift approached the object's course, altered slightly, preparing without delay. Researchers spoke of resonance again, an attunement to space that echoed across every reading. Attention soon turned toward the faint thermal pulses originating from deep within. These pulses repeated on the familiar rhythm, observed since the first detection, steady interval, brief silence return. But new analysis revealed patterns within the silence itself. Minute fluctuations in the thermal gradient formed tiny harmonics, too soft to detect during earlier scans. Each harmonic suggested layering within the internal structure, multiple shells communicating through shifts in temperature rather than force. It resembled the way vibrations travel through instruments, each layer shaping the final tone. The nature of these harmonics became clearer when the outer surface responded milliseconds later. Reflectivity changed, scattering, decreased absorption shifted. The interaction resembled internal alignment, as though the object prepared itself for transitions in environment. Some theorists proposed a form of internal clock, not one that measured time, but one that mapped rhythm, recording the universe through cycles rather than seconds. Others wondered whether the structure stored energy in these pulses, drawing from the surrounding medium only when necessary. Uncertainty remained, but the beauty of the pattern invited quiet reflection. While the object travelled through a field of solar particles, spectrographs captured something unexpected. The surrounding plasma dimmed slightly in the ultraviolet band, creating a veil-like effect around the object. This dimming was not absorption, it was reorientation. Particles shifted their angles of emission, forming a gradient of light that matched the object's path. It was as though the presence generated a soft envelope, a region where radiation bent into smoother curves. No known, natural body shapes radiation with such grace. Yet the phenomenon remained gentle, devoid of disruption. During one of the longer observation windows, as the object moved into a corridor of relatively still solar wind, its brightness dipped, and then rose again, not sharply, but in a controlled transition that mirrored its internal cycles. Scientists noted the consistency of this modulation. Variability meant nothing without pattern. But when pattern repeats across different wavelengths, across different environments, meaning begins to form. Light became not simply reflection, but expression. A cosmic language without sound. More revelations arrived when multiple observatories synchronized their readings. Frequency analysis revealed that the narrow infrared band emitted by the object held within it faint substructures, delicate ridges along the signal that repeated with near-perfect precision. These ridges were too ordered to arise from noise. They appeared and faded like slow waves, forming cadence rather than message. Attempts to decode them as communication yielded no direct meaning, yet none of the researchers dismissed the possibility. Instead, they considered that perhaps the object expressed not information, but identity, the way pulses mark themselves through rhythm. Mass readings provided another surprise. As the object continued to shrink through its inward folding process, the internal lattice revealed hints of complexity. Radar imaging displayed fractal-like repetition, along structural contours repeating intervals that suggested function rather than fracture. Natural erosion cannot create such uniformity, nor can melting. The folding appeared deliberate, easing material inward without releasing debris. If it was a form of preparation, the purpose remained beyond reach. Thermal mapping soon revealed the central core more clearly. Cold as ever yet, surrounded by shells that absorbed and redirected heat with perfect discipline. These shells worked together, each holding a piece of equilibrium. When solar wind buffeted the surface, the shells tightened their regulation, maintaining internal stability with no strain. Scientists remarked that stability itself had become a clue. Whatever the object carried or whatever it preserved required isolation from heat, from radiation, from disruption. It was a system built around stillness. As these findings accumulated, a quiet shift spread across the scientific community. Instead of searching for force, they searched for harmony. Instead of seeking engines, they looked for patterns in fields. Words like propulsion drifted away. Words like resonance, coherence, and attunement took their place. The object behaved less like a traveller crossing space, and more like a presence responding to the canvas through which it moved. In the stillness of these realizations, one thought settled over every observer, watching the faint pulse glide across screens. Tonight, the stars will keep their silence. As the object moved deeper into the inner system, its path revealed a subtle purpose, woven through each correction, each shift in brightness, each pause between pulses. Orbital simulations, layered across thousands of iterations, pointed toward a truth that did not shout, but whispered from behind numerical patterns. Randomness alone could not shape this trajectory. The object drifted with grace through gravitational folds that scatter most bodies, yet here each turn aligned with windows of low resistance. It was motion shaped not by force, but by awareness of opportunity. When the object entered a region rich in magnetic complexity, its rhythm changed once again. Brightness stabilized into a softer glow, while internal heat pulses grew slightly more defined. These pulses no longer appeared as singular beats. They carried faint echoes, harmonics that shimmered along thermal gradients like notes of a chord. Researchers studied the timing carefully. Each harmonic anticipated boundary shifts before they arrived, as though the internal system understood the environment through resonance rather than measurement. Even the most reserved analysts admitted that the behavior felt more like adaptation than reaction. High-resolution arrays soon detected something stranger. As the object neared a solar magnetic ridge, an arc of plasma extended from its flank not outward, as if expelled, but inward. Charged particles curved toward the surface, then vanished into fields too subtle to detect. The arc resembled a funnel guiding material not toward propulsion, but toward transformation. Some proposed energy harvesting, others speculated on field balancing. Yet the process unfolded so calmly that the universe itself seemed unconcerned with offering clarity. During this phase, the outer shell shifted reflectivity again, but unlike earlier transitions that darkened uniformly, this alteration painted the surface with patterns resembling overlapping waves. These waves drifted across the structure with a rhythm that matched the infrared pulses, as though the object's inner and outer layers conversed. If earlier behavior suggested layered function, this moment revealed layered harmony, different states working in unity through light, heat, and silence. Traveller moments like this invited stillness rather than urgency. Radio stations then recorded a phenomenon that unsettled assumptions. A burst of faint interference swept briefly across several arrays, not centered on the object but spreading behind it in a widening arc. When analysed, this interference revealed no noise. Instead, it held organised voids gaps arranged in consistent intervals, forming a pattern of absence rather than presence. Researchers described it as the shadow of a signal, not a signal itself. In those voids, data vanished with purpose, not decay. Silence once again became the signature. Orbital dynamics teams studying its path discovered an additional oddity. The object no longer followed a simple inward descent toward perihelion. Instead, its trajectory formed a slow, deliberate curve toward a region where gravitational and magnetic forces balanced delicately. The curve matched neither natural capture nor escape. It matched prediction, yet prediction no human had made. Long-range models confirmed that the object's path traced a corridor where minimal energy was needed to alter course sharply. Bodies do not naturally seek such corridors, systems do. Tidal influences at these distances often disturb rotational stability, yet the object held orientation with the calm of a suspended needle undisturbed by wind. Every 11 minutes the same face aligned with Earth, maintaining posture through regions where solar pressure should have induced wobble. The absence of drift became a kind of poetry, not rigidity, not mechanical insistence, a form of equilibrium shaped by a deep logic. During one observation window near the current sheet, spectrometers detected a series of faint reflections that shifted wavelength in steps. These steps aligned with the variations in electromagnetic density, suggesting the object used changing states of light as guidance markers. Such behaviour resembled how migratory birds sense magnetic fields, though magnified across cosmic distances. Here, light itself became navigation. The object followed it not as illumination, but as structure. A new insight emerged as scientists studied the folding of its outer envelope. Earlier sections had contracted inward, revealing filigree-like structures beneath. Now, as reflections grew sharper, the lattice displayed increased symmetry patterns that repeated in fractal-like intervals along each exposed contour. More astonishing was that these intervals aligned with the harmonics detected in infrared pulses. Structure, energy, and motion appeared tied together in a single cyclical system. Nothing about it felt chaotic. Nothing felt improvised. It was as though the object was preparing for a phase that required refinement across every layer. Thermal inertia models attempting to replicate the cold central core failed repeatedly. Even under intense radiation, the object refused to rise in internal temperature. Instead, heat diffused outward while the core remained untouched. Some theorists proposed a material that existed in a state requiring near zero thermal noise to function. Others suggested containment of something not yet active. Each idea felt incomplete, yet each pointed toward the same quiet revelation Cold here was not absence. It was preservation. As the object approached its next alignment point, the surrounding plasma dimmed once again in ultraviolet. But this time, the dimming traced a slow spiral behind it, revealing a trail not of matter, but influence. The trail thinned with distance, dissolving into space as though the object's journey etched patterns into the medium. A presence does not always mark its path through force. Sometimes it marks it through harmony. All these behaviours accumulated into a picture still incomplete, still shifting yet undeniably coherent. The object moved as though guided by law, beyond standard physics, shaped not by impulse, but by continuity. Through every adjustment, every pulse, every silence, it reminded the scientific community of something profound. Knowledge grows not only through discovery, but through humility. And in the quiet that followed these realizations, one soft truth returned steady as the pulse of distant stars is all right to not know. 2. The object entered the final stretch of its inward journey with a stillness that felt deliberate. Its brightness no longer rose or fell in noticeable increments. Instead, it settled into a quiet glow that mirrored the steady hum of the solar environment around it. Observatories across the world gathered streams of data, all pointing toward a single truth. The behavior once seen as anomaly had shifted into something resembling completion. The pulses continued, the reflectivity shifted with precision, but there was a subtle change in tone, a sense that the phases unfolding across earlier distances had reached a point of balance. As the object approached the region where solar wind met gravitational pull in delicate equilibrium, its internal heat cycles softened. They did not weaken. They matured. What once pulsed in strong intervals now flowed in smoother arcs, each pulse stretching into a longer breath. The thermal harmonics that earlier formed discrete steps now merged into waves, blending into each other with a cohesion that impressed even the most seasoned researchers. It was as if the object had entered a mode designed for proximity, a way of existing that merged more gracefully with the inner solar rhythms. Light patterns on the surface shifted with new complexity. Interference structures danced across the shell in spiraling lines, faint but persistent. These spirals followed neither longitude nor latitude. They traced curves that seemed to map invisible contours within the surrounding field. Analysts described them as cartographic, though no map appeared. Others noted the spirals resembled pathways of least resistance through electromagnetic density, turning the object into a kind of roaming instrument that charted space by moving through it. Each shift in pattern represented a reading, and each reading fed back into its orientation. For the first time, reflected beams became narrower, gathering into thin lines that extended behind the object instead of outward. These lines did not brighten space. They shaped it. Charged particles reorganized themselves within the beams, forming soft channels that extended like threads. The channels dissolved quickly, almost playfully, as though they existed only to stabilize transitions in movement. Their presence hinted at a deeper mechanism operating beneath observation, a mechanism not meant to impress but to refine. Simultaneously, the object's position relative to gravitational harmonics revealed another quiet revelation. Its course passed through a point where 3 gravitational wells overlapped in subtle tension. Natural bodies experience chaotic motion in such zones. The object did not. Instead, it drifted through with serene ease, adjusting its posture with millimetric shifts. It found stability where none should exist, stretching the limits of what classical dynamics predicted. Even researchers who avoided speculation admitted that this ease resembled familiarity, as though the object had passed through such harmonics many times before. The massa reduction, once steady, began to slow. In earlier phases, the folding of the outer layers revealed intricate structures beneath. Now the folding diminished, leaving the surface smoother and more continuous. Whatever purpose the earlier contraction served, it seemed complete. Radar imaging revealed increased reflectivity along new bands aligned with thermal nodes. This indicated the emergence of a new configuration, one more cohesive and unified than before. The object did not shed mass endlessly. It shaped itself until ready. As it neared the node where plasma density dipped sharply, instruments picked up a final pattern in particle motion. For a brief span, the solar wind behind the object became unusually calm, as though the object drew a thin envelope of stillness around itself. This envelope did not expand outward. It remained tight, precise, a boundary held by gradients rather than force. Within this calm, tiny fluctuations in ultraviolet light traced shapes too delicate to name. Some suspected resonance with internal processes, others believed it signaled transition. Whatever the meaning, the moment carried quiet beauty. Radial scans detected faint echoes from the object, not reflections of external signals but soft emissions of its own. These emissions repeated at long intervals, emerging like ripples from a stone dropped gently into deep water. Each ripple carried consistency, not in frequency, but in decay, fading with elegant symmetry. Such emissions had no clear function, yet they appeared during moments when the object adjusted course, as though marking each shift with a signature, not a message, but a gentle acknowledgement of motion. When the object reached a region where gravitational and magnetic fields intertwined, it slowed not abruptly but gradually, as though it knew that resistance would aid refinement. The pulses lengthened once more. Light dimmed slightly, not decay preparation. Models predicted that such behavior allowed the object to traverse the final portion of its alignment without destabilizing its core. That core remained cold, preserved, untouched by heat, even as surrounding radiation climbed. Layered shells reshaped flow around it, forming a barrier strong yet calm. The object then entered a zone of solar illumination that lit its surface in long, sweeping arcs. Under this glow, the subtle patterns etched along the lattice shimmered with faint iridescence. More details emerged, microscopic ridges that aligned into fractal constellations, each ridge a variation of the last, each variation echoing earlier thermal harmonics. The structure revealed nothing mechanical. Instead, it revealed intent through order, purpose through symmetry. Scientists across the world sat with the same quiet understanding. The closer the object came, the less it behaved like a wanderer, and the more it behaved like a presence entering a phase long prepared for. Whether that phase was arrival transformation or simple passage remained unknown. But the unknown, at least here, carried no fear, only calm, and as the object continued forward, leaving behind threads of plasma, threads of light, threads of silence, one truth drifted across every observatory. With the ease of cosmic dust tonight, the stars will keep their silence. As the object reached the final arc of its inner system passage, its motion shifted once more, not in speed but in tone. Earlier phases revealed adaptation, calibration, transformation. Now there was refinement. Every correction in trajectory became smaller. Every pulse of infrared softened into longer, steadier waves. The presence that once felt distant now carried an intimacy born from months of observation. Its behavior no longer startled. It invited quiet study, like the last strokes of a pattern reaching completion. Thermal mapping revealed that the outer shells had entered a state of near-perfect equilibrium. Temperature gradients fluctuated within margins so small they resembled stillness. This stillness, however, did not indicate inactivity. It suggested readiness. Internal signals, once sharp, then harmonic, now unfolded as layered sequences, each merging into the next, with the softness of ripples meeting the edge of a lake. Researchers noted that the pulses no longer transmitted energy outward. They circulated within strengthening resonance between the shells. In the language of data, it resembled a system synchronizing its final state. Light reflected from the object changed as well. No longer directional, no longer forming narrow beams, the reflections spread evenly across the surface, forming a soft, sustained glow. Spectrographs revealed micro-adjustments in wavelength delicate shifts that corresponded to variations in local radiation. But these shifts did not produce signals. They produced harmony light interacting with space in a way that eased the object through the densest regions of illumination. Each interaction unfolded without strain, as though illumination itself played a role in guiding the object's final path. Meanwhile, the folding of the outer envelope appeared to halt. For the first time in weeks, imaging showed no further retraction. The structure had settled. Radar lines traced the contours of the newly exposed lattice beneath revealing patterns that curved into repeating intervals like spirals etched in stone. These intervals aligned with earlier thermal cycles, demonstrating once again the unity between form and behaviour. Whatever had driven the reconfiguration had reached its conclusion. The object presented itself now as something whole, not shifting, not unravelling, but complete. Plasma readings in the surrounding region offered another quiet revelation. As the object passed through areas of heightened density, the solar wind behaved with a gentleness unseen in earlier phases. Instead of curling inward or forming narrow funnels, charged particles drifted around the object as though guided by a low sustained hum. The hum was not sound. It was balance, a state in which plasma no longer resisted the presence, but flowed alongside it in graceful arcs. Some researchers described it as submission. Others preferred the term coherence. Whatever name they used, the effect remained the same. The medium made room for the object. Radio silence returned briefly during a long observation session. Unlike earlier intervals, this silence arrived not as a sudden boundary, but as a gentle fade, reducing interference layer by layer, until the region around the object fell into quiet. Within that quiet, a faint thermal shift echoed across the outer shells. This shift did not align with solar cycles or magnetic changes. It aligned with nothing measurable. It existed as a moment of internal rearrangement, a calm breath before transition. When radio signals resumed, they passed without distortion. The silence had ended, but its impression lingered. Trajectory models showed the object approaching a zone of gravitational symmetry, a place where competing forces could hold a body in temporary balance before releasing it outward. Natural bodies sometimes drift through such regions by chance, but their paths wobble, their orientation shifts, and their spin fluctuates. This object held posture so precisely that each movement resembled intention. Its slow arc through the zone matched predictions once thought improbable, a curve that minimized energy loss while maximizing stability. Not efficiency through force, but efficiency through understanding of the field. As distance narrowed, long-range imagery captured the faintest detail, a shimmer across the lattice, subtle yet distinct, tracing the emergence of new alignment across the inner structure. These alignments formed patterns resembling star charts, not in appearance, but in distribution nodes linked by unseen vectors, each responding to the slightest environmental shift. Some speculated that the lattice mapped the object's path. Others believed it mapped conditions required for whatever came next. No conclusion settled, but the elegance of the formation moved even the most stoic researchers into quiet reflection. As the final segment of the inner system passage unfolded, the object drifted toward the next phase of its unknown journey, with no sign of strain, no sign of conflict, no disruption of symmetry. Observers across the world paused not out of suspense, but out of reverence. They understood that whatever purpose guided this presence had unfolded not through spectacle, but through steady refinement, through restraint, through silence. And in that silence, the universe offered a simple reminder: tonight the stars will keep their silence. And now, as the last traces of Through Our Atlas fade back into the dark, we return to the simple truth that guided us from the beginning. Dreamer, the universe rarely speaks loudly. Most of its messages arrive the way this one did, in soft pulses and shifting light in patterns that ask us to slow down before we understand. Tonight we drifted through data that felt less like evidence and more like echo. We followed a presence that moved with patience, precision, and a silence deeper than distance. And in that silence we were reminded that observation is an act of humility. To look upward is to admit how small we are, and yet how deeply we wish to listen. What 3 Atlas revealed may never fit neatly into certainty, but mystery is not failure, it is invitation, a reminder that the cosmos is still alive, still whispering, still unfolding itself, in ways our instruments can detect, but our language can barely hold. If the universe wanted to test our attention, it succeeded. If it wanted to tilt our perspective, it has done that too. And long after this object vanishes from our charts, the wonder it awakened will continue to widen the space within us where questions can breathe. Rest well, dreamer. The universe will keep watch,